Hello everyone, and welcome to the DXD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was the hunter of the night who defied Dracula. Issei x Carmilla x Rias Gremory, Castlevania x DXD. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Blood Heritage. The scent of blood hung in the night air, not the clean, sharp smell of fresh wounds, but something older and fouler. Issei Hyodo inhaled deeply, sorting through the layered odors with practiced precision. His fingers tightened around the leather-wrapped hilt of his silver-edged short sword as he crouched on the weathered roof tiles of Kuo Town's abandoned paper mill. 3 floors below, vampires were feeding. Not the nobles with their elaborate codes and politics, but feral ones, what hunters called bloodseeds. Freshly turned, mindless with hunger, and all the more dangerous for it. Issei counted 6 distinct blood trails leading into the building. 6 victims dragged to slaughter by creatures that had once been human. Too late to save them, he murmured, voice barely audible above the autumn wind. The statement wasn't callous, just a tactical assessment. Survival in his profession demanded emotional distance. Moonlight caught the red gem embedded in the worn leather bracer on his left arm. The boosted gear, dormant now, but a constant reminder of his complicated existence. Few hunters possessed sacred gears, those divine artifacts that usually gravitate toward humans with no knowledge of the supernatural. Fewer still could reconcile the supposedly holy mission of hunting with the demonic nature of their powers. Issei had made peace with the contradiction years ago. Power was power. What mattered was how you used it. He slipped from the roof to a rusted fire escape, moving with the silent efficiency that had kept him alive for 5 years of solitary hunting. At 19, he was younger than most who carried the title of hunter, but experience in the field counted more than years. And Issei had accumulated experience at a rate that made hunters regard him with equal parts respect and unease. The window before him was broken, jagged glass teeth still protruding from the frame. He navigated through without disturbing a single shard, landing in what had once been an administrative office. Papers long yellowed with age scattered beneath his boots. The stench of blood grew stronger here, mixed with the coppery tang that only vampiric feeding produced, blood oxidizing at an unnatural rate as it was consumed. Issei removed a small leather case from his coat pocket. Inside lay 5 slender vials of clear liquid, each capped with distinctive colored wax, hunter's tools. Alchemical creations specialized for tonight's work. He selected one sealed with blue wax and tucked it into his palm. A woman's scream echoed through the building, cutting off with terrible abruptness. He moved toward the sound, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with the spatial awareness that came from years of fighting in unfamiliar territories. Building's layout unfolded in his mind like a tactical map. 3 floors, central stairwell, manufacturing floor to the east, loading docks to the west. The vampires had chosen well. The abandoned Lex offered multiple escape routes and plenty of shadow-draped corners. Too bad they hadn't accounted for him. The first vampire emerged from a doorway ahead, a young woman in blood-splattered business attire. Her movements jerky as her newly transformed body adjusted to undeath. She froze when she spotted Issei, nostrils flaring at the scent of living blood. Her eyes, once human, now gleamed crimson in the darkness. "Hunter," she hissed, the word distorted by elongated canines. Issei didn't bother responding. Bloodseeds rarely retained enough humanity for meaningful conversation. Instead, he hurled the blue-sealed vial at her feet, where it shattered on impact. Liquid splashed across the floor, instantly vaporizing into a swirling mist that smelled of crushed herbs and blessed silver. The vampire shrieked as the mist touched her skin, raising angry welts wherever it made contact. Not enough to kill, but plenty to distract. Issei lunged forward, silver-edged blade leading. The RST strike separated her hand at the wrist as she raised it defensively. The second found her heart with practiced precision. She collapsed into rapidly decaying matter, the accelerated decomposition that followed a vampire's true death. 5 left. The commotion drew attention. Footsteps pounded against the floor above, and a male voice shouted commands, more coherent than the typical bloodseed. That suggested an older vampire was directing the newly turned, which complicated matters. Issei rolled his shoulders, loosening tension. Complications were simply part of the job. He ascended the stairs two at a time, listening to the chaotic movements above. They knew a hunter had found them now. They would either flee or organize an ambush. Considering the commanding voice he'd heard, Issei suspected the latter. The second floor opened into what had once been the main administrative center, an open floor plan with collapsed cubicle dividers creating a maze of debris. Perfect territory for an ambush. Issei paused at the top of the stairs, reaching into his coat for another vial, this one sealed with red wax. A blur of motion to his right gave barely enough warning. Issei dropped flat as a male vampire lunged over him, missing his throat by centimeters. Without rising, Issei drove his blade upward, catching the creature in the abdomen. Not a killing blow, but enough to buy seconds. He rolled away as two more vampires converged on his position, a heavy-set man whose police uniform suggested he'd been turned while on duty, and a teenage girl whose snarling face still bore traces of beauty beneath the blood madness. Coordinated attack, Issei muttered appreciatively. Someone's been training you. The injured vampire was already recovering, undead flesh knitting itself together around the silver-inflicted wound. All three prepared to rush him simultaneously, a tactic that would overwhelm most hunters. Issei's left arm pulsed with warmth as he called upon a fraction of the boosted gear's power. Boost, he whispered. The gem in his bracer flashed in response, channeling energy through his body. Strength and speed doubled, senses sharpened. When the vampires attacked, Issei was ready. He sidestepped the police officer's charge, slashing across the back of his knee with precision that severed tendons. As the creature stumbled, Issei vaulted over him, twisting in midair to face the other two. His free hand smashed the red-sealed vial against the floor. Flames erupted in a perfect circle, sacred fire that burned supernatural flesh but merely warmed human skin. A teenage vampire shrieked as her legs ignited, the consecrated flames racing up her body with unnatural hunger. The third vampire, smarter or more experienced, leapt backward to avoid the spreading fire. Issei pursued, pressing his advantage. Their blades met in a shower of sparks, the vampire wielding a curved dagger with surprising skill. "You're no ordinary bloodseed," Issei noted, studying Hai's opponent's refined technique as they exchanged rapid strikes. The vampire's lips curled into a smile that revealed blood-stained teeth. "And you're no ordinary hunter. Wielding a sacred gear, how unorthodox. A veteran, then, perhaps even the leader." Issei increased his tempo, blade-weaving patterns designed to create openings rather than score direct hits. The vampire matched him initially, but Issei's boosted reflexes eventually found their advantage. His blade slipped past the vampire's guard, opening a shallow cut across its chest. The creature hissed in pain as silver poisoned its system. "The Crimson Emperor," it said, recognition dawning in its inhuman eyes. "Dracula will be interested to learn you're in this territory." The name sent ice through Issei's veins, momentarily disrupting his rhythm. That hesitation nearly cost him as the vampire launched a desperate offensive, dagger aimed for his throat. Issei parried by instinct alone, mind reeling from the implications. Dracula, a name from the oldest hunter texts. A nightmare thought long defeated. "What do you know of Dracula?" Issei demanded, renewing his attack with increased urgency. The vampire laughed, a wee sound gurgling through blood-filled lungs. "Only that he rises. Only that this world will burn when he—" A silver blade erupted from the vampire's chest, cutting off its proclamation. The creature stared down in shock as a slender hand withdrew the weapon, allowing its body to collapse into rapid decay. Behind it stood a woman Issei had never seen before, tall, with crimson hair cascading past her shoulders and eyes that glowed with supernatural power. She wore what appeared to be a modified school uniform beneath an elaborate crimson coat embroidered with arcane symbols. Not a hunter's attire by any standard Issei recognized. Devil, he identified instantly, dropping into a defensive stance despite his fatigue. The woman raised an elegant eyebrow. "Is that how you thank someone who just saved your life?" "I had the situation under control." Issei kept his blade ready, senses extending to locate the remaining vampires. Two signatures retreating rapidly toward the west exit. The leader and one other eliminated. The police officer vampire still disabled but regenerating near the stairwell. "Of course you did," she replied with aristocratic amusement. That's why you're bleeding from 3 separate wounds and breathing like you've run a marathon. Issei touched his side, fingers coming away wet with blood he hadn't noticed in the heat of combat. Your point is noted. Now state your business, devil. This is a hunter operation. My name is Rias Gremory. She spoke with the casual confidence of nobility. And technically, this is my territory. The real question is what you're doing here, hunter. Footsteps approached from behind her. More devils, judging by the magical signatures Issei sensed. He calculated his odds against multiple opponents in his current condition. Not favorable. I go where the hunt takes me, he answered carefully. Vampire activity has been increasing across 3 prefectures. I'm tracking the pattern. How interesting. Rias tilted her head, studying him with unsettling intensity. We've noticed the same phenomenon. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere that doesn't reek of death and industrial chemicals. Issei's attention snapped to the disabled vampire, now attempting to crawl toward the stairwell. Without taking his eyes off Rias, he flicked his wrist, sending a slender throwing knife spinning across the room to pierce the creature's heart. Another problem eliminated. I don't make a habit of socializing with devils, he said flatly. 4 more figures emerged from the shadows behind Rias. A petite white-haired girl with an expressionless face. A beautiful young woman with long black hair tied in a ponytail, whose smile didn't reach her watchful eyes. A pretty boy with blonde hair who carried himself like a swordsman. And a bespectacled young man who radiated controlled magical energy. Her peerage, Issei identified mentally. Devil nobility traveled with their servants, reincarnated humans bound through magical contracts. Another complication he didn't need tonight. What a shame, said the black-haired woman, her voice melodic with underlying steel. And here we brought tea and everything. Akano, Rias said with gentle reprimand before addressing Issei again. You mentioned Dracula. That name has appeared in our intelligence as well. If there's a connection to these vampire attacks, we have mutual interests worth discussing. The tactician in Issei recognized the logic. The hunter in him rebelled at the thought of cooperation with devils. 5 years of solitary work had reinforced his reference for handling supernatural threats alone. Fewer complications, fewer chances for betrayal. But Dracula, that changed the equation. 1 hour, he conceded finally. Neutral ground. The coffee shop at Kuo Station. Rias smiled. A diplomatic victory secured. Excellent. Shall we say midnight? That gives us both time to clean up. Her gaze flickered meaningfully to the blood staining his coat. Issei nodded curtly, already planning 3 different escape routes from the proposed meeting place. Just in case. Don't be late, hunter, said the blonde swordsman, his tone carrying subtle challenge. Kiba, Rias cautioned before Issei could respond. Let's remember our manners with a potential ally. Issei almost laughed at that. Hunters and devils as allies. His mentor would ROLL in his grave, if he'd been fortunate enough to have one. More likely the old man's remains were scattered across the Carpathian forest where death had finally found him. Midnight, Issei confirmed, sheathing his blade but maintaining ready access. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 2 more vampires to eliminate before they reach the city center. Without waiting for a response, he vaulted over the nearest cubicle divider and sprinted toward the western exit. The devils made no move to follow, though he felt their gazes on his back until he disappeared into the darkness. Kuo Stati, hummed with the diminished energy of late-night operations. The last trains had departed, leaving only cleaning staff, security personnel, and the occasional late traveler passing through the cavernous main concourse. Perfect for Issei's purposes, public enough to discourage overtly hostile actions, empty enough to spot potential threats. He'd arrived 40 minutes early to secure the optimal position within Blue Moon Coffee, a 24-hour establishment tucked into the station's northwest corner. The cafe's large windows offered clear sightlines to all major entrances, while the back exit provided a direct route to maintenance corridors Issei had mapped during previous operations. The middle-aged barista had raised an eyebrow at his request for the corner booth but asked no questions. When he ordered a black coffee and a slice of apple pie he had no intention of eating. Civilians in areas with supernatural activity developed selective blindness as a survival mechanism. They recognized dangerous individuals without consciously acknowledging why they felt uneasy. Issei had changed his blood-stained coat for a dark blue jacket worn over a simple black shirt. The boosted gear remained visible on his left arm, a calculated display of power. His weapons were less obvious but no less accessible, silver-edged daggers in forearm sheaths, blessed throwing spikes in specialized pockets. And a compact pistol loaded with mercury core rounds strapped to his ankle. Trust, but verify, and be prepared to eliminate threats if verification failed. Exactly at midnight, the Devil Conti engine arrived with theatrical punctuality. Rias Gremory led the procession, her crimson hair drawing every eye in the station despite the late hour. She'd exchanged her elaborate coat for an elegant black blazer over a crimson blouse, still projecting authority but less overtly supernatural. Only 3 of her peerage accompanied her: the black-haired woman named Akeno, the blonde swordsman Kiba, and the petite white-haired girl. A gesture of restraint, perhaps, or strategic distribution of forces across her territory. Issei watched them approach, noting their formation, Rias at center point, Kiba slightly ahead as vanguard. The white-haired girl scanning continuously for threats, Akeno's hands positioned for immediate spellcasting despite her relaxed demeanor. They moved with the coordinate precision of a unit accustomed to combat. Interesting. Not what he'd expected from devil nobility, typically more concerned with politics than field operations. Right on time, Issei acknowledged as they reached his table. Punctuality is a virtue, even among devils, Rias replied with a smile that carried both warmth and calculation. May we join you? He gestured to the empty seats, taking note of how they arranged themselves. Rias directly across from him, Akeno to her right, Kiba and the white-haired girl positioned to maintain sightlines to all entrances, mirroring his own tactical awareness. I don't believe I caught your name earlier, Rias said after they settled. Issei Hyodo, the Crimson Emperor, Akeno added, her eyes glinting with interest. Your reputation precedes you in certain circles. Issei maintained a neutral expression. The title was one he neither claimed nor denied, a hunter designation earned through actions rather than self-promotion. That devils knew of it suggested they monitored hunter activities more closely than he'd realized. I'm not here to discuss reputations, he said evenly. You mentioned mutual interests regarding vampire activities. Rias nodded, accepting his redirection. Direct and focused. I appreciate that. She gestured to her companions. Allow me to properly introduce my team. Akeno Himahima, my queen. Yuto Kiba, my knight. And Kaneko Tuju, my rook. Chess designations, the traditional hierarchy within a devil's peerage. Each role carried specific magical enhancements and combat specializations. Issei filed key information away for tactical consideration. Now, to business, Rias continued. Over the past 3 months, we've documented a 340% increase in vampire activity within Japanese territories. Not just the mindless bloodseeds you eliminated tonight, but organized incursions by vampire nobility previously content to remain in European territories. She withdrew a slim tablet computer from her bag, activating a holographic display discreet enough to avoid civilian notice but detailed enough to show a map of Japan overlaid with incident markers. Your tracking is comprehensive, Issei observed, recognizing patterns that matched his own findings. Devil territories maintain rigorous supernatural monitoring, Akeno explained, her voice carrying the formal cadence of someone quoting official policy. Incursions by other factions are documented and assessed for threat level. The white-haired girl, Kaneko, spoke for the first time, her voice surprisingly flat and emotionless. We kill ings that hunt in our territory without permission. Issei's lips quirked slightly. Straightforward policy. Yet we didn't kill you, Kiba noted pointedly. Yuto, Rias chided gently before addressing Issei again. What my knight means to say is that we recognized you were eliminating a mutual threat. Hunters traditionally operate independently, but these vampire activities suggest something coordinated on a scale that might benefit from collaborative efforts. Issei studied the holographic display, noting incident clusters that created a distinct pattern when viewed collectively. Not random attacks, but a methodical testing of boundaries, probing defenses, assessing response times, gathering intelligence. Military tactics. Preparation for something larger. You mentioned Dracula earlier, he said finally. What exactly have your intelligence sources uncovered? Rias exchanged glances with Akeno, some silent communication passing between them before she responded. Fragments, primarily. Increased chatter among vampire courts about the resurrection. Ancient texts being stolen from supernatural archives across Europe. And a name that keeps recurring, Dracula. Myths and legends. Hiba interjected with obvious skepticism. Dracula is a boogeyman story vampires tell to frighten their young. No, Issei said flatly. He was real. The most powerful vampire to ever exist. Capable of challenging gods before he was defeated by the combined efforts of 3 hunter bloodlines. The certainty in his voice drew their full attention. You speak as if from personal knowledge, Rias observed carefully. Issei considered how much to reveal. Hunter knowledge was typically guarded jealously, passed down through bloodlines or formal apprenticeships. Sharing with Devils v. Isolated traditions older than most countries. But traditions hadn't prepared him for the pattern emerging on Rias's holographic map. The Hyodo bloodline has hunted vampires for 27 generations, he said finally. My family archives contain first-hand accounts of the original conflict with Dracula. If he's returning, the vampire you killed tonight was right, this world will burn. Sile. NCE settled over the table as the Devils processed his statement. Even the normally expressionless Kaneko showed subtle signs of concern. How is resurrection possible for a vampire of such antiquity? Akeno asked finally. Even devil resurrection has strict limitations regarding temporal distance. Vampire resurrection differs from devil contracts, Issei explained. It requires specific ritual components. Blood from a willing descendant, a catalyst object that contained a portion of the original vampire's power, and a supernatural convergence point where dimensional barriers are naturally thinner. Understanding dawned in Rias's eyes. The incident pattern forms ritual parameters, she realized, manipulating the holographic display to highlight connections between attack locations. Quote, they're not random feedings or territory expansions. They're preparing something. Issei nodded grimly. The vampire mentioned Dracula's interest in my presence specifically. The Hyodo bloodline was among those who originally defeated him. Our blood carries a resonance his followers could use. Which explains why they've concentrated activities in Japan despite their European power base, Rias concluded. They're hunting you, not just me, Issei corrected. The ritual would require blood from all 3 bloodlines involved in the original defeat. The Belmont line is extinct as far as I know. The Belnades family retreated into hiding centuries ago. Leaving you as the accessible target, Akeno said thoughtfully. Have you encountered direct attempts to capture you? 3 in the past month. None successful. Issei didn't elaborate on the fate of those who had tried. Rias leaned forward, her expression shifting from diplomatic to intensely focused. If what you're suggesting is correct, this threat extends beyond traditional faction boundaries. Vampire dominion under Dracula would threaten devils, angels, fallen, and humans alike. It would upset the fragile balance established after the Great War. Hiba acknowledged reluctantly. The Gremory family has significant influence within devil society, Rias continued. We can provide resources, intelligence networks, and supernatural backing that would amplify your hunting capabilities. In exchange for what? Issei asked bluntly. Devils never offered assistance without calculating returns on investment. Rias smiled, appreciating his directness. Protection of our territory and populace. Access to hunter knowledge regarding vampire weaknesses and counterstrategies. And a mutual defense pact until this threat is eliminated. And your brother, where does Lucifer stand on cross-faction cooperation? Issei's question triggered visible surprise among the devils. His intelligence on their hierarchy clearly exceeded their expectations. Sears supports any measure that prevents large-scale supernatural conflict, Rias answered carefully. Though I would appreciate discretion regarding my familial connections in general discussion. Issei considered his options. Working alone had defined his hunting methodology for years. No complications, no compromises, no one to protect but himself. Aligning with devils introduced variables he couldn't fully control. Yet the pattern on the holographic display spoke volumes. This was bigger than traditional hunter operations. If Dracula truly returned at full power, no single faction could stand against him. Conditional cooperation, he decided finally. I maintain operational independence but will share critical intelligence and coordinate on major operations. In return, I expect access to devil resources and information networks is needed. Reasonable terms, Rias agreed with diplomatic precision. Though I would request adding a liaison position to facilitate effective communication. Quote, Issei raised an eyebrow. Meaning, Akino interjected with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, that one of us would work directly with you. To ensure information flows efficiently in both directions. I don't play well with partners, Issei stated flatly. Consider it less a partnership and more a strategic alliance with dedicated communication channels. Rias countered smoothly. Akino's expertise in arcane matters and barrier creation would complement your hunting skills. The woman in question studied him with calculating eyes that belied her gentle smile. Something in her gaze suggested personal interest in the arrangement beyond diplomatic necessity. Before Issei could respond, his phone vibrated with an alert pattern he deprogrammed for high-priority situations. He checked the screen with practiced subtlety. We need to conclude this meeting, he said, already calculating the fastest route to the coordinates displayed on his device. There's been another attack, larger scale than tonight's incident. Rias's expression shifted immediately from diplomatic to tactical. Where? Abandoned shrine in the Eastern District. My monitoring equipment detected multiple vampire signatures converging there 15 minutes ago. That's within my territory, she noted with evident concern. How many? At least a dozen. Possibly more depending on how many the initial wave turned. Heba leaned forward. That's not a feeding pattern. That's a coordinated operation. Issei nodded grimly. My assessment as well. Error after something specific at that location. The Eastern Shrine sits on a ley line convergence point, Akino noted, her playful demeanor replaced by professional focus. It's one of the strange supernatural nexus points in the region. A potential ritual site, Issei concluded, rising from his seat. I need to move. Rias stood as well, decision already made. We're coming with you. S is precisely the sort of situation our agreement was designed to address. We don't have an agreement yet, Issei pointed out. Consider this a trial run, she countered with a confidence that suggested she rarely heard the word, no. My team can deploy barrier magic to contain the situation and prevent civilian exposure. Practical considerations overrode Issei's preference for solitary operation. A dozen vampires presented tactical challenges even for an experienced hunter. Devil assistants, especially barrier specialists, would provide significant advantages. Fine, he conceded, but I lead the vampire engagement. Your team handles containment and civilian protection. Agreed, Rias said without hesitation. We can teleport directly to the location through a magic circle. It'll be faster than conventional transportation. Issei hesitated. Devil teleportation circles were notoriously specific to their users. Allowing himself to be transported through one represented a significant trust exercise. Rias seemed to read his thoughts. I understand your hesitation, but time is critical. The circle will deliver you exactly as you are to the shrine's outer perimeter. You have my word as head of the Gremory house. Quote, time constraints made the decision for him. Let's move. They exited the coffee shop together, finding a secluded service corridor where Rias quickly inscribed a complex magical circle. Crimson light pulsed as the teleportation matrix activated, enveloping them in supernatural energy. Issei felt the characteristic disorientation of spatial displacement, a sensation like being simultaneously compressed and expanded. Then solid ground materialized beneath his feet as the transportation completed. They stood at the edge of a neglected shrine complex. Ancient gates listed at dangerous angles, their red paint long faded to a dull rust color. Stone lanterns lay toppled along the approach path, and the main shrine building's roof had partially collapsed from years of abandonment. Yet power still radiated from the site, a thrumming supernatural energy that Issei felt through his hunter senses. The ley line convergence Akino had mentioned, and within the shrine's inner courtyard. Movement. Multiple figures performing what appeared to be systematic excavation around the central worship stone. 12 visible vampires, Kaneko reported quietly. Her enhanced senses cataloging the threat. 4 more inside the main building. 2 appear to be noble class based on their auras. Nobles don't participate in field operations unless the objective is high value, Issei noted. Retrieving his silver-edged short sword from its concealed harness. Whatever they're excavating must be significant. We should establish a perimeter barrier before engaging, Akino suggested. Hands already weaving preliminary magical patterns. Rias nodded. Akino, create a containment field. Kaneko, secure the eastern approach. Kiba, western. I'll take the southern barrier point. That leaves the northern position to me, Issei concluded, already mapping his attack route through the shrine complex. The barrier will prevent escape and conceal supernatural energies from human detection. Akino explained as complex sigils formed around her fingers. But it won't interfere with movement within the perimeter. Perfect, Issei acknowledged, genuinely impressed with the efficiency of their tactical deployment. Devils they might be, but they operated with disciplined precision. We'll need 3 minutes to establish complete barrier coverage, Rias informed him. Can you delay direct engagement until then? Issei nodded, already moving toward the northern approach point. I'll begin reconnaissance. Signal when the barrier is active. He melted into the shadows with practiced ease, circling the shrine complex to approach from the blind side of the main building. The night air carried the distinctive scent of vampire activity, that peculiar combination of old blood, ozone, and something indefinably other that marked the undead. As he drew closer, fragments of conversation became audible. Must be completed before midnight. The alignment will not recur for another 70 years. A male voice, cultured and precise, one of the nobles, judging by the aristocratic cadence. The excavation proceeds as scheduled, Count Orlok's. A subordinate's deferential response. We've located the chamber beneath the central stone. Excellent. Lady Carmilla will be pleased with our progress. Once we retrieve the artifact, we can proceed to the next phase of the resurrection. Issei froze momentarily at the name. Carmilla, another vampire from the ancient texts. Not as powerful as Dracula, but a formidable strategist and political force within vampire society. If she was involved in resurrection efforts, the situation was even more critical than he'd initially assessed. A soft chime from his phone indicated the completion of the devil barrier. Time to act. Issei activated the boosted gear, feeling power surge through his left arm as the sacred artifact responded to his will. Boost, he whispered, channeling the energy to enhance his physical capabilities. The gem embedded in the bracer pulsed with crimson light. One boost doubled his baseline abilities. A second would quadruple them. But each boost demanded physical toll, source to be managed carefully in extended combat. He withdrew a specialized throwing spike from his jacket, this one tipped with a compressed capsule of blessed silver particles suspended in consecrated oil. A hunter's tool designed specifically for creating chaos among vampire groups. With practiced precision, he hurled it toward the center of the excavation team. The spike embedded itself in the ground at their feet, the impact triggering the capsule's release mechanism. A cloud of shimmering silver particles erupted outward, carried by the explosion of oil droplets. Vampires shrieked as the blessed substance made contact with exposed skin, creating immediate chemical burns that would slow healing and disorient lesser undead. Issei didn't wait to observe the full effect. He was already in motion, vaulting over a collapsed section of shrine wall to engage directly. The first vampire to recover from the silver bomb turned just in time to meet Issei's blade. Silver-edged steel parted undead flesh with minimal resistance, separating head from shoulders in a single fluid strike. The creature collapsed into rapidly decaying matter as Issei continued his advance. 2 more blood seeds rushed him from opposite directions, a pincer attack that would have trapped a less experienced fighter. Issei dropped to one knee at the last possible moment, allowing them to collide above him. His blade flashed upward, opening a lethal wound across one vampire's abdomen while his free hand drove a blessed silver spike into the other's heart. Hunter! The cry went up among the remaining vampires, their focus shifting from excavation to immediate threat. Not just any hunter, came the cultured voice Issei had heard earlier. Count Orlok stepped from the shadows of the main shrine building, tall, gaunt, with aristocratic features and eyes that glowed with the power of centuries. The Crimson Emperor himself. How fortuitous. The noble vampire wore formal attire that would have looked appropriate in a 19th century European court, a tailored black frock coat over a crimson waistcoat, with an elaborate cravat pinned with what appeared to be a ruby the size of a small egg. His hands remained casually clasped behind his back, projecting absolute confidence despite the chaos Issei had created among his subordinates. Orlox, Issei acknowledged, recognizing the name from Hunter archives. House Tep's loyalist. I thought your line was extinguished during the Budapest purge. A thin smile creased the vampire's bloodless lips. How delightful to be remembered in Hunter lore. The Budapest unpleasantness merely culled our lesser branches. The true bloodline endures, as it always shall. 5 remaining bloodseeds formed a protective semicircle around their master. The Econ noble had yet to emerge from the shrine building, but Issei sensed a powerful presence within. Whatever you're excavating stays buried, Issei stated flatly, blade held at ready position. I think not, Orlox replied with aristocratic disdain. The crimson tear has lain dormant in this pathetic country for too long. When combined with your blood, fresh from the source, ideally, it will complete the first phase of our Lord's return. Movement at the shrine's perimeter signaled the devil's approach, Rias and her peerage converging now that the barrier was fully established. Orlox's eyes narrowed as he assessed the new arrivals. Devils. How disappointing, Crimson Emperor. Consorting with Lucifer's lesser children speaks poorly of Hunter standards these days. Says the vampire grave robbing in foreign territory. Rias countered smoothly, crimson energy gathering around her hands as she prepared her signature destruction magic. This shrine falls under Gremory protection. Your unauthorized incursion violates 3 separate supernatural treaties. Orlox's laugh held no humor. Treaties. Such tedious constructs. Soon, all such paper barriers will burn away in our Lord's resurgence. A tremor ran through the ground beneath their feet. From the excavation pit, a crimson light began to pulse, rhythmic like a heartbeat. You're too late, Orlox announced with evident satisfaction. The crimson tear responds to proximity of Hyodo blood, even without direct contact. Fascinating, isn't it? Your mere presence accelerates our work. Issei cursed under his breath. If his bloodline resonated with whatever artifact they sought, his arrival had inadvertently advanced their agenda. Akeno, can you suppress the energy signature? Rias called, already moving to engage the bloodseeds protecting Orlox. Temporarily, Akeno responded, hands weaving complex magical patterns. But all need direct access to the excavation site. Tactical priorities crystallized in Issei's mind. All clear a path. Kiba, Kaneko, flank and contain the nobles. Rias, cover Akeno's approach. The devils responded to his commands without hesitation, falling into the coordinated assault pattern. As if they'd trained together for years. Issei led the charge, boosted gear flaring with accumulated power. Explosion, he called, channeling the stored energy into his blade. Silver-edged steel became a conduit for concentrated power, releasing a wave of force that scattered the bloodseeds like leaves in a hurricane. Rias followed immediately, crimson destruction energy obliterating 2 vampires caught in the blast radius. Kaneko vaulted over the chaos with inhuman agility, landing behind Orlox and engaging him with devastating close-quarters strikes that forced the noble to abandon his aristocratic posturing for serious combat. Kiba manifested multiple demonic swords, his knight-enhanced speed creating a whirlwind of lethal steel that contained the remaining bloodseeds, preventing air interference as Akeno advanced toward the excavation pit. The coordinated assault created precisely the opening they needed, yet something felt wrong to Issei. The second noble remained unaccounted for, and Orlox seemed almost pleased despite losing tactical advantage. Akeno, wait, Issei called, instinct warning him of hidden danger. Too late. As the devil reached the edge of the excavation, the second noble vampire emerged, not from the shrine building, but from the pit itself. A female figure with pale alabaster skin and eyes like frozen blood rose with unnatural grace, one hand clutching a crimson gemstone the size of a fist. The tier is secured, she announced in a voice like silk drawn over broken glass. Count, we have what we came for. Unlike Orlox's antiquated attire, he wore modern clothing, a tailored white suit that emphasized her lithe physique, with a single crimson rose at her lapel. Her hair, black as midnight, was styled in an elegant bob that framed features of such perfect symmetry they could only be the result of centuries of vampiric preservation of mortal beauty. Lady Bartley, Orlox acknowledged with deference that bordered on worship. The Hunter bloodline representative has arrived. As predicted, the female vampire, Lady Bartley, turned her attention to Issei, studying him with clinical detachment. So this is the last Hyodo. Younger than expected, but the blood resonance is unmistakable. Her lips curved into a predatory smile. He will do nicely for the ritual. Akeno unleashed a devastating lightning attack that should have incapacitated any vampire, noble or otherwise. Lady Bartley merely gestured with her free hand, and the electricity dissipated harmlessly around an invisible barrier. Devils, she sighed with evident disappointment. So predictable in their aggression. No finesse whatsoever. Issei lunged forward, blade aimed for the hand clutching the gemstone. Lady Bartley moved with blinding speed, evading his STR. Ike while simultaneously drawing a thin silver rapier from a concealed sheath. Better, she approved as their blades met. The hunter shows initiative. I see why Carmilla expressed interest in your preservation rather than simple harvesting. Their exchange of blows revealed her as a master duelist, each movement precise, economical, and devastatingly effective. Issei found himself driven back despite his boosted gear advantages, forced into defensive patterns as she probed his technique for weaknesses. Around them, the battle had shifted. Orlox, seemingly energized by his superior's arrival, had reversed Kaniko's initial advantage. Rias and Kiba found themselves occupied with a sudden surge of shadows that coalesced into wolf-like constructs, Lady Bartley's magic, presumably. We shall continue this discussion under more favorable circumstances, Lady Bartley suggested conversationally, as if they were arranging a social appointment rather than fighting for their lives. Perhaps NCE you've come to understand the inevitability of our Lord's return, you might reconsider your position. Not interested in vampire recruitment pitches, Issei grunted, parrying a thrust that would have pierced his throat. She laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes that somehow conveyed genuine amusement rather than the mocking tones Orlox preferred. How charmingly direct. Carmilla was right about your potential. Lady Bartley executed a blindingly fast riposte that scored a shallow cut across Issei's cheek. A small sample to confirm compatibility. Perfect. She raised the gemstone, He crimson tear, which pulsed in response to Issei's blood on her blade. The entire shrine complex trembled as supernatural energies converged around the artifact. The first key is secured, she announced. Orlox, we depart. The barrier prevents teleportation, Rias called, destroying another shadow wolf with a blast of crimson energy. You won't escape. Lady Bartley's smile never wavered. Conventional barriers, perhaps, but you've overlooked the natural properties of this location. She drove her rapier into the ground at the center of the excavation pit, channeling power through the blade into the earth below. The ley line convergence offers alternatives to those who understand primordial pathways. The ground split beneath her feet, crimson light pouring from the widening fissure. Orlox disengaged from Kaniko with unexpected agility, moving to his superior's side as shadow enveloped them both. Until our next meeting, Crimson Emperor, Lady Bartley's voice echoed as her physical form dissolved into the light. Do try to survive until then. Your blood is required, intact. Issei lunged forward, but his blade met empty air as the vampires and the crimson tear vanished into the ley line pathway. The fissure sealed itself with a thunderous crack, leaving only scorched earth where they had stood. Damn it. Issei drove his blade into the ground in frustration. They got what they came for. Rias approached, dismissing her destruction magic as the immediate threat receded. What exactly was that artifact? The crimson tear. I don't know, Issei admitted, the unfamiliar name troubling him. It's not mentioned in my family archives. But they clearly connected it to the resurrection ritual. Lady Bartley, Akeno said thoughtfully. The name appears in Devil Intelligence reports. She's rumored to be Carmilla's right hand, a power player in vampire politics who rarely involves herself in field operations. Which means whatever they excavated is exceptionally important, Kiba concluded, his demonic swords dissolving as he released his power. Kaniko approached the sealed fissure, crouching to examine residual energy signatures. They used the ley line as a transportation method. That's old magic, predating standardized devil circles. They're adapting, Issei realized. Combining ancient techniques with modern tactical approaches. This isn't random vampire aggression, it's a coordinated campaign with specific objectives. Rias studied him with newfound respect. It seems our agreement comes none too soon. If vampires of that caliber are operating in Japan, We face a more significant threat than either of us initially assessed. Issei cleaned his blade methodically, mind already cataloging the night's revelations. Dracula's resurrection, the Crimson Tear, Lady Bartley's interest in his blood, Carmilla's apparent involvement, pieces of a puzzle still taking shape. We need information, he decided. Everything your devil networks can access about vampire movements globally, ritual components associated with resurrection magic, and particularly anything regarding Carmilla or this Crimson Tear. Agreed, Rias nodded, and in return, I'll share everything in my family archives regarding Dracula's original defeat and the hunter bloodlines involved. There may be connections we're missing. The practical alliance that had med so questionable hours earlier now appeared not merely convenient but necessary. Issei looked at the devils, Rias with her tactical command presence, Akino's magical expertise, Kiba's swordsmanship, Kaniko's raw strength and sensory abilities. Each brought capabilities that complemented his hunter training. Where do we establish our base of operations? He asked, the question itself an acknowledgement that his solitary hunting days were temporarily suspended. The Occult Research Club room at Kuo Academy, Rias answered promptly. It's already warded against supernatural detection and serves as our territorial headquarters. A school, Issei raised an eyebrow. Hide in plain sight, Akino explained with a knowing smile. No one questions students and faculty coming and going at a prestigious academy. Perfect cover for supernatural operations. The practicality of the arrangement was undeniable, though the thought of operating from a school environment seemed surreal after years of abandoned buildings and cemetery lairs. I'll need unrestricted access and a secure space for my equipment, Issei stipulated. Easily arranged, Rias assured him. The old dormitory connected to the club building is currently unoccupied. We can convert it to suit your requirements. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, dawn approaching after a night of unexpected developments. Issei felt the familiar weariness that followed intense combat, complicated by new concerns about the vampires, apparent interest in his bloodline specifically. Rest and regroup, he decided. I'll review my archives for any mention of the Crimson Tear. We'll reconvene this evening to establish a coordinated response plan. And in the meantime, Kiba inquired. In the meantime, Issei replied grimly, increase your territorial patrols. What happened tonight wasn't their endgame, it was just the opening move. As they departed the shrine, Issei glanced back at the scorched earth where the vampires had disappeared. The hunt had changed fundamentally tonight. No longer tracking isolated nests or feral feeders, but confronting an organized campaign led by vampire nobility with specific objectives. And somehow, his blood was key to their plans. The familiar weight of hunter responsibility settled across his shoulders, heavier now with the knowledge that he fought not just to eliminate individual threats, but to prevent the return of a being whose power had once threatened the world itself. Dracula was coming, and Issei Hyodo, last of his bloodline, stood directly in the resurrection path. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Crimson Alliance. Morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned patterns across the polished wood floor of Kuo Academy's Occult Research Club. Dust motes danced in the colored beams, an oddly peaceful sight in a room where supernatural war councils now convened. Issei sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by ancient texts and modern intelligence reports, creating connections between centuries-old hunter knowledge and contemporary devil surveillance. The transition from solitary predator to reluctant collaborator had happened with unsettling speed. The Crimson Tear isn't mentioned in any standard devil reference texts, Rias announced, closing a leather-bound volume with a disappointed sigh. She brushed crimson hair from her face, the gesture betraying fatigue after hours of research. However, I've requested access to the restricted archives in my brother's personal library. Issei glanced up from a weathered journal, written in his great-grandfather's meticulous hand. Anything from your contacts in other factions. The Fallen have promised information in exchange for updates on our findings. Akino entered car, ying a silver tray with tea service, an incongruously civilized offering amidst their grim research. Azazel himself expressed concern about vampire movements near their European strongholds. Heavenly factions remain typically unhelpful, Kiba added from his position by the window where he maintained casual vigilance over the academy grounds. though Irina mentioned unusual activity around certain sacred sites in Romania. Issei paused, the name registering distantly. Irina Shido. Kiba turned, surprise evident in his expression. You know her. Childhood friend. Memories surfaced of a pigtailed tomboy who'd moved away years ago, before his parents' deaths, before his introduction to the hunter's life. A fragment from another existence. I didn't realize she was involved with the church. Exorcist in training, Rias clarified, accepting tea from Akino with a grateful nod. One of Michael's promising protégés. Her father was stationed in Japan briefly, I assume during your childhood. Issei nodded, compartmentalizing the unexpected connection. Another time, another life. Does she have specific information about the Romanian sites? Nothing detailed, Kiba answered. That certain long-dormant protections have activated recently. Church authorities are investigating. The information aligned with patterns Issei had noted in his family archives, supernatural warning. Systems established after Dracula's original defeat, designed to alert hunters to resurrection attempts. Those systems had apparently degraded or been forgotten over centuries as the immediate threat faded from memory. Kaneko entered the room silently, moving with the preternatural grace that characterized her rook abilities. She placed a manila folder on the table beside Rias. Sightings confirmed, she reported in her characteristic monotone. 3 separate vampire signatures detected near Sendai last night. Pattern matches previous incursions. Rias opened the folder, examining photo graphs and energy readings with practiced efficiency. Expanding their search parameters. Moving north from our territory. Looking for something specific, Issei concluded, rising to examine the report. Or someone. The implication hung in the air. Lady Bartley's interest in Issei's blood had been explicitly stated during their confrontation. If his bloodline was essential to their ritual, they would pursue him relentlessly. Which brings us to immediate security concerns, Rias said, seamlessly transitioning to tactical matters. As both a hunter and a potential ritual component, you represent a high-value target. We need to establish protective protocols without compromising operational flexibility. The suggestion of protection bristled against Issei's independent nature. 5 years of solitary hunting had reinforced self-reliance as his core operational principle. I can handle myself, he stated flatly. Akino's lips curved in a knowing smile. No one doubts your capabilities, Issei. But even the most skilled hunter sleeps eventually. I've managed so far. By maintaining constant movement and never establishing patterns, Rias countered. That approach limits your effectiveness as an investigator and strategist. We need stability to coordinate properly. The practical assessment was difficult to refute. Issei had survived through mobility and unpredictability. Effective for a lone operative but incompatible with their current alliance. What do you propose? He asked finally. The old dormitory has been prepared as we discussed, Rias answered. Akino Ha's established layered barrier protections that will alert us to any supernatural approach. Kaneko and Kiba will maintain rotating perimeter surveillance during vulnerable periods. Issei raised an eyebrow. And you? I'll be coordinating with my brother's intelligence networks and maintaining communication with allied factions. She met his gaze directly. Unless you'd prefer my personal supervision during your rest periods. The teasing challenge carried an undercurrent that Issei couldn't quite interpret, something beyond the expected devil manipulation but not quite genuine warmth. The established protocols are sufficient, he replied evenly, refusing to be baited. Akino's soft laugh suggested his response had somehow confirmed something to her satisfaction. These devils operated on social wavelengths his hunter training hadn't prepared him for. Perhaps we should examine the dormitory accommodations, she suggested. You'll want to establish your equipment and verify the security measures personally. The practical suggestion provided welcome redirection. Issei gathered the most relevant research materials, organizing them with military precision before following Akino toward the connected building. The old dormitory stood 3 stories tall, a Victorian-inspired structure that had once housed boarding students when Kuo Academy served exclusively as an all-girls school. Its conversion to a co-ed institution had rendered the space redundant, leaving it conveniently vacant for their purposes. The main floor has been configured as an operations center, Akino explained as they entered through a covered walkway connecting to the club building. Communications equipment, weapon storage, and tactical planning space. The former common room had indeed been transformed with remarkable efficiency. Modern computers and communication systems occupied one wall, while tactical maps and monitoring equipment dominated another. A large conference table centered the space, currently displaying a holographic projection of regional supernatural activity. Devil technology, Issei observed, examining a monitoring system that tracked energy signatures with greater precision than his hunter equipment. More advanced than I expected. We've adapted human innovations while incorporating magical enhancements, Akeno explained. Devils have always excelled at technological assimilation. She led him to a reinforced door at the far end of the operations center. This section has been specifically modified to your specifications. Weapons storage, maintenance facilities, and specialized equipment. The armory beyond would have impressed even Issei's mentor. Racks of traditional weapons alongside modern firearms, alchemical components organized in climate-controlled cabinets, and workshop stations equipped for maintenance and modification. Your personal arsenal has been transferred from your previous safe house, Akeno continued. Though we took the liberty of supplementing certain areas where inventory appeared insufficient. Issei examined a cabinet containing silver ammunition in various calibers, significantly more than he'd personally stockpiled. Generous contribution. The Gremory family understands the value of proper equipment, Akeno replied with practiced diplomacy. Especially when facing opponents of this caliber. They proceeded upstairs, where the dormitory's residential function remained more evident. The second floor contained several bedrooms, each converted to serve specific purposes, medical facilities in one, communications center in another. Research library in a third. Your personal quarters, Akeno indicated, opening a door at the end of the hallway. We assumed you'd prefer the corner room for tactical reasons. Multiple exit points, clear sightlines to the academy grounds, and reinforced walls. The bedroom was Spartan but functional, a military-style bed, practical furnishings, and a weapons rack within arm's reach of the sleeping area. Large windows offered the sightlines Akeno had mentioned, though heavy blackout curtains could eliminate light when needed. An adjoining bathroom provided necessary facilities, while a small kitchenette in the corner offered basic self-sufficiency. Someone had considered his operational preferences with surprising accuracy. The arrangement seems adequate, Issei acknowledged, testing the window latches and exit routes through practiced habit. Though I'm curious how you anticipated my preferences so precisely. Akeno's smile held secrets. Devil intelligence is quite thorough. We've been aware of your activities for some time, though we maintained non-interference per supernatural treaties regarding hunters. The casual revelation that devils had money toward him without his knowledge was unsettling. Issei had believed his movements effectively concealed from supernatural factions. How long? He asked, voice carefully neutral. Approximately 14 months, she replied without apology. Since your hunting activities first intersected with our territorial boundaries. You eliminated a vampire nest near Kyoto that had been causing problems for one of our allied houses. It brought you to our attention. Issei remembered the operation, a complex infiltration of a vampire stronghold that had required 3 nights of preparation and resulted in the elimination of 17 bloodseeds and their maker. He'd believed his presence completely undetected. Your operational security was excellent, Akeno added, correctly interpreting his expression. But certain magical signatures are impossible to completely mask, particularly your sacred gear activations. The boosted gear creates ripples in supernatural detection fields. The information presented a tactical vulnerability Issei hadn't considered. His sacred gear, while providing combat advantages, created magical evidence of his presence that specialized monitoring could detect. Is there a way to suppress the signature? He asked, mind already exploring countermeasures. Possibly, Akeno considered thoughtfully. My expertise includes barrier creation and energy manipulation. We could potentially develop a dampening field that minimizes detection without compromising function. The practical approach appealed to Issei's tactical mindset. That would be valuable for covert operations. I'll begin research immediately, she agreed. Though it would require detailed analysis of your sacred gear's energy patterns during activation. We would need to conduct controlled testing. Before Issei could respond, a chime sounded throughout the building, 3 short tones followed by a longer one. Rias is calling us back, Akeno explained, immediately moving toward the door. That's our priority signal, They return to the club room to find Rias standing before a large communication circle glowing with magical energy. The ethereal image of a silver-haired man in a labo. Rate formal attire floated above the circle, a magical projection from a remote location. Perfect timing, Rias noted as they entered. Issei, this is my brother Sears's Lucifer. He has information relevant to our investigation. The projected figure studied Issei with ancient eyes that belied his youthful appearance. Power radiated from him even through the magical connection, the unmistakable presence of a Satan-class devil. Issei Hyodo, Sears acknowledged with formal precision. The hunter known as the Crimson Emperor. Your reputation is impressive for one so young. Lord Lucifer, Issei responded with matching formality, recognizing the political necessities of supernatural diplomacy. I appreciate your faction's cooperation in this matter. Sears nodded, apparently satisfied with the response. My archivists have located references to the Crimson Tear in our restricted historical records. It appears to be one of 3 artifacts created during Dracula's original reign. GN, components of his power externalized as insurance against permanent defeat. Soul fragments, Issei realized, connecting the information to hunter lore. Phylacteries designed to preserve essence even if the physical form is destroyed. Quote, precisely, Sears confirmed. The Crimson Tear contains aspects of Dracula's blood manipulation abilities, his power to corrupt and transform living tissue. 2 other artifacts exist. The Shadow Mantle, containing his dominion over darkness, and the Chaos Gauntlet, housing his reality manipulation capabilities. The implications were immediately clear. They're collecting the components for complete resurrection, Issei concluded. Not just reviving Dracula, but restoring him to full power. Our intelligence suggests the Shadow Mantle was secure. By vampire operatives in Romania 3 months ago, Sears continued. A church facility was breached with unusual precision, indicating coordinated action by vampire nobility. And the Chaos Gauntlet? Rias asked. Current location unknown, though historical records place it in Alexandria during the library's destruction. It may have been lost or secured by another faction. They'll be searching for it, Issei noted. Or already have leads we're unaware of. Sears' expression conveyed agreement. Which brings me to the second purpose of this communication. Our network has detected unusual movements within vampire political structures. House Tep's loyalists have suddenly withdrawn from established territories across Europe. Simultaneously, House Carmilla has consolidated power in several key regions. Civil conflict within vampire society. Rias suggested. Not precisely, Sears corrected. More a strategic realignment. Those loyal to Dracula's legacy are gathering for what appears to be a major operation. Those aligned with Carmilla's faction are positioning defensively while maintaining unusual diplomatic outreach to other supernatural factions. Carmilla opposes Dracula's resurrection, Issei questioned, the information contradicting his understanding of vampire hierarchies. Historical records positioned Carmilla as one of Dracula's most loyal lieutenants. Her motivations remain unclear, Sears acknowledged, but her operatives have established communication channels with multiple supernatural factions in recent weeks, including tentative overtures to devil representatives. Lady Bartley mentioned Carmilla during our confrontation, Issei recalled. She implied Carmilla had specific interest in my preservation rather than simply harvesting my blood. Interesting, Sears murmured thoughtfully. The political landscape may be more complex than initial assessment suggested. I would advise caution in all vampire encounters. Factional motivations appear to be in flux. The communication concluded with formal acknowledgments and promises of continued information sharing. As Sears' projection faded, Rias turned to address the assembled group. This changes our tactical approach, she stated, immediately shifting to strategic planning. We're not dealing with unified vampire aggression but competing factions with potentially different objectives. Dracula loyalists seek resurrection components, Kiba summarized. While Carmilla's faction seems to be preparing for conflict while establishing diplomatic connections. Which faction does Lady Bartley represent? Akino questioned. Her actions secured the Crimson Tear, suggesting Dracula loyalty, but she referenced Carmilla's interest in Issei. Double agent, Kaneko suggested flatly. Playing both sides. Or the factions have more complex relationships than external intelligence suggests, Issei countered, drawing on historical knowledge. Vampire politics operate on centuries-long schemes. Surface actions rarely reveal true motivations. Rias nodded thoughtfully. Regardless, we need more information before determining which vampire faction, if any, might be potential allies against Dracula's return. I may have a resource, Issei offered after brief consideration. A contact in Hong Kong with connections to vampire information networks. Former Hunt R who now operates as a neutral information broker. Can this contact be trusted? Rias asked. Within parameters, Issei replied honestly. He sells information to all factions, but his accuracy is reliable. He values his reputation for factual intelligence over political allegiances. Make contact, Rias decided. We need insight into vampire factional positions that devil intelligence networks can't access. The strategic discussion continued through midday, establishing information priorities and operational protocols. By late afternoon, clear objectives had emerged: gather intelligence on both vampire factions, locate the Chaos Gauntlet before Dracula's loyalists secured it, and develop countermeasures against ritual use of Issei's blood. As evening approached, a different kind of preparation began. Kiba retrieved practice weapons from storage while Kaneko cleared furniture from the center of the club room. Combat assessment, Rias explained as Issei observed the preparations with curiosity. If we're going to function effectively as a unit, we need practical understanding of each other's capabilities and techniques. The concept made tactical sense, though Issei had never trained extensively with non-hunters. His combat methodology had developed through practical experience rather than formal instruction since his mentor's death. We'll begin with basic sparring to establish baselines, Kiba suggested, offering Issei a practice sword of similar weight and balance to his preferred weapon. No powers or special abilities initially, just physical technique. Issei accepted the training weapon, testing its balance with practiced assessment. Parameters. Contact without injury, Rias clarified. The objective is mutual assessment, not victory. Kiba took position opposite Issei, his stance revealing formal swordsmanship training. Ready when you are, Hunter. The initial exchange was measured, each combatant testing the other's reactions and preferring without committing to decisive movements. Kiba's technique displayed classical European influences with Japanese refinements, suggesting formal education under multiple masters. Issei's style was more pragmatic, incorporating elements from various traditions based on effectiveness rather than philosophical adherence. Interesting hybrid approach, Kiba noted as they circled. I see Romanian NTER techniques blended with Japanese practicality. And I see Devil Knight training layered over human kendo foundations, Issei countered, recognizing the distinctive footwork patterns. They accelerated gradually, exchanges becoming more complex as mutual assessment progressed. Kiba possessed superior technical precision, each movement executed with textbook perfection. Issei compensated with unpredictable variations and pragmatic adjustments, hunter training emphasizing survival over form. After 10 minutes of increasingly intense exchange, Rias called a halt. Neither combatant had established decisive advantage, exactly the outcome of a properly conducted assessment. Excellent foundation, she noted with evident satisfaction. Kiba's technical precision complements Issei's adaptive unpredictability. They'll work well in tandem against multiple opponents. Now with abilities, Kaneko suggested, stepping forward as Kiba withdrew to the sidelines. Rias nodded agreement. Kaneko will demonstrate rook capabilities, enhanced strength and durability. Limited power usage only. The petite girl took position opposite Issei, her expressionless face betraying nothing of her intentions. Despite her diminutive stature, Issei sensed the supernatural power coiled within her frame, the characteristic energy signature of a rook-enhanced devil. This exchange began without the measured testing of the previous bout. Kaneko launched immediately into close-quarters engagement, her speed belying her strength-oriented abilities. Issei found himself forced into defensive positioning, her raw power requiring evasion rather than direct blocking. Rooks sacrifice speed for strength and durability, Rias explained as Issei narrowly avoided a strike that cracked the floorboards. Though Kaneko has compensated through specialized training, Issei adapted quickly, recognizing the pattern underlying Kaneko's apparently straightforward assault. Hunter training against physically superior Our opponents emphasized leverage and redirection rather than direct opposition. He began incorporating these principles, using Kaniko's momentum against her while minimizing direct contact. Good adjustment, Akino noted from the sidelines. Most opponents make the mistake of testing her strength directly. The demonstration concluded after Issei successfully executed a complex evasion sequence T. Hat positioned him advantageously behind Kaniko, a theoretical victory position though he stopped short of actual contact. Acceptable, Kaniko acknowledged with the barest hint of respect in her typically emotionless voice. Akino next, Rias directed. Magical assessment. This exchange took different form, Akino maintaining distance while demonstrating controlled lightning manipulation. Rather than direct combat, she created increasingly complex patterns of electrical energy that Issei needed to navigate while advancing toward her position. Devils specialize in specific magical affinities, Rias explained as Issei analyzed the electrical patterns for exploitation opportunities. Akino's lightning abilities represent the highest precision control in my peerage. The exercise revealed the substantial difference between hunter and devil methodologies. Hunters trained primarily against vampires and other physical threats, with magical countermeasures designed for specific creature types. Devil combat incorporated more varied supernatural elements, requiring broader tactical flexibility. Your turn, Issei suggested to Rias after completing Akino's assessment course. Unless you prefer to maintain observational position. A competitive smile flickered across her aristocratic features. I wouldn't miss the opportunity for practical evaluation. She moved to the center of the cleared space. Crimson energy already gathering around her hands. My specialty is destruction magic. Pure entropy channeled through precise control. The demonstration that followed impressed even Issei's experienced assessment. Rias commanded devastating power with surgical precision, creating effects ranging from pinpoint disruption to area devastation. Her control suggested years of rigorous training beyond the natural abilities granted by her bloodline. The power of destruction is the Gremory family's inherited ability, Akino explained as Issei navigated increasingly complex destruction patterns. Rias has refined her control beyond typical mastery for her age. The combined assessment exercises continued for over an hour, each participant demonstrating core abilities while learning adaptation strategies for effective teamwork. By conclusion, theoretical understanding had transformed into practical knowledge, the foundation for coordinated operations against high-level threats. Effective session, Rias noted with satisfaction as they concluded. We'll incorporate combined tactical drills in future training. The structured approach differed significantly from Issei's solitary methodology but offered clear advantages for coordinated operations. Despite his ingrained independence, he recognized the tactical benefits of their complementary abilities. Your hunter training emphasizes different priorities than devil combat education, Kiba observed as they stored practice equipment. Focused on elimination efficiency rather than power demonstration. Hunters typic ally operate alone against numerically superior opponents, Issei explained. Survival requires pragmatism over formal technique. Yet you incorporated formal elements from multiple traditions, Akino noted. Your swordwork shows Romanian hunter foundations with Japanese influences, while your movement patterns include European military training. The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. My mentor trained under the Belmont lineage before their decline, Issei acknowledged. He incorporated elements from various hunter traditions based on effectiveness rather than philosophical purity. The Belmonts, Rias said thoughtfully, one of the 3 bloodlines in your family records that originally defeated Dracula. Issei nodded, memories surfacing of his mentor's rare discussions of hunter history. The Belmont, Belnades, and Hyodo lines formed the original triumvirate that sealed Dracula's power. Each contributed different aspects to the binding ritual. And now the Belmonts are extinct. Kiba questioned. Presumed extinct, Issei clarified. The main lineage disappeared approximately 80 years ago after a confrontation in Austria. Some records suggest branches may have survived under different names. But confirmation has proven elusive. And the Belnades line, Rias inquired, went into hiding around the same period. They were primarily magic practitioners rather than direct combatants. Historical records suggest they became traveling scholars to preserve their knowledge while maintaining low profiles. The information exchange was interrupted by an alert from the communication system. a priority signal from one of the boundary monitoring stations established after the shrine incident. Vampire signatures detected, Akino reported, examining the incoming data with practiced efficiency. Multiple entities approaching from the northwest. Pattern matches coordinated movement rather than random feeding. Tactical focus immediately replaced the training atmosphere. Issei moved to the weapons cabinet, retrieving his field equipment with practiced motions. How many? Rias asked, already activating communication circles to alert her remaining peerage members. Initial reading shows 8 distinct signatures, Akino answered. 2 register as noble class based on power levels. The others appear to be combat-trained bloodseeds rather than fresh turns. Location: Industrial district near the harbor. Approaching what appears to be an abandoned shipping warehouse. Issei recognized the area description immediately. That's one of my equipment caches. Secondary storage for specialized hunting gear. Understanding dawned across the Devil group. They're tracking your resources, Rias concluded. Systematically eliminating your support infrastructure. The tactical implications were clear. The vampires were methodically reducing Issei's operational capabilities while potentially gathering intelligence on hunter techniques and equipment. We need to intercept before they secure the location, Issei stated, checking his weapon loadout with swift efficiency. That cache contains experimental compounds designed specifically for high-level vampire incapacitation. Teleportation circle to the nearest secure location, Rias decided immediately. Akino, prepare transport for 5. What about Asia and Gasper? Kiba inquired, referring to peerage members Issei hadn't yet encountered. Asia remains at the church with the recently rescued exorcist, Rias answered. Gasper's abilities aren't suited for direct vampire confrontation. They'll maintain secondary security here while we address the immediate threat. Preparation proceeded with military precision. Equipment checked, communications established, tactical approach planned. Within minutes, they stood ready around Akino's transportation circle as she completed the complex magical formula. This will place us approximately 200 meters from the target location. She explained as arcane symbols pulsed with gathering power. Close enough for immediate response while maintaining surprise advantage. The teleportation activated with a flash of crimson light. The characteristic displacement sensation enveloping the group momentarily before resolving into their destination. A narrow alley between manufacturing buildings, the harbor visible as a stretch of darkness beyond industrial silhouettes. Issei oriented immediately, hunter senses extending to catalog the environment. Salt air mixed with industrial chemicals, distant machinery hummed despite the late hour. And the subtle wrongness that signaled vampire presence registered at the edge of perception. 2 blocks east, he indicated quietly. The warehouse with the collapsed loading dock. Seacon. D floor has been converted to secure storage. Rias nodded understanding. Kiba, Kaneko, flanking approach from north and south. Akino, establish aerial observation. Issei and I will take direct approach once positions are confirmed. The team dispersed with practiced efficiency, each member moving toward assigned positions without unnecessary communication. Issei noted their operational discipline. Nay, with grudging appreciation. Devils they might be, but they functioned with professional precision that matched hunter protocols. Your team works well together, he observed quietly as he and Rias advanced toward the target building using available cover. More field experience than I expected from devil nobility. The Gremory approach to peerage differs from traditional devil practices, she explained. Matching his stealthy movement with surprising competence. I believe in direct involvement rather than distant management. We train together, fight together, and develop together. The philosophy aligned more closely with hunter methodology than typical devil hierarchy, an unexpected commonality that suggested Rias Gremory defied conventional categorization. A soft chime from their communication devices signaled team readiness. Akino's voice came through with perfect clarity despite minimal volume. 8 confirmed targets, 6 bloodseeds with military-style formation securing perimeter. 2 nobles inside the structure, power signatures match Count Orlocks from previous encounter. Second noble unidentified but female presenting. Lady Bartley, Rias questioned. Negative. Different magical signature. Lower power level but more specialized patterning. Issei processed the tactical information. They've already breached the outer security. Secondary defenses will trigger if they attempt to access the storage units. Specialized defenses. Kiba's voice inquired through the communication link. Hunter-specific, Issei confirmed without elaborating. His security syst. Ms. incorporated elements that devils might find objectionable, including blessed components designed to incapacitate multiple supernatural species. Approach recommendation. Rias prompted, demonstrat, ing unexpected deference to his tactical assessment despite her leadership position. Issei considered the situation with practiced efficiency. Simultaneous elimination of perimeter guards before they can alert the nobles. Kaneko and Kiba take the exterior bloodseeds, 3 targets each. Akeno provides aerial cover against escape. You and I confront the nobles directly. Agreed, Rias confirmed without hesitation. Execute on my mark. Quote, the coordinated attack launched with precision that would have impressed Issei's mentor. Kiba manifested multiple demonic swords, engaging 3 bloodseeds simultaneously with night-enhanced speed that left them no opportunity to raise alarm. Kaneko's approach favored direct force, crushing strikes that eliminated her targets with brutal efficiency. I and Rias advanced through the opening created by their teammates, entering the warehouse through a service entrance that bypassed most conventional security measures. Inside, the cavernous main flow stood empty except for abandoned manufacturing equipment, massive metal forms looming like industrial sculptures in the darkness. Movement on the upper level caught their attention, shadows shifting against deeper darkness as the vampire nobles became aware of the perimeter breach. Intruders, a female voice hissed, the sound carrying the distinctive harmonic distortion of vampire speech. The hunter approaches with devil allies. Precisely as anticipated, came Orlox's cultured response. Proceed with the extraction. I shall entertain our guests. Issei activated the boosted gear, Crims. On light flaring as power surged through the sacred artifact. Boost, he murmured, channeling enhanced abilities through his system as they ascended toward the upper level. Rias matched his power activation. Destruction energy gathering around her hands in pulsing crimson spheres. Remember, we need information as much as elimination, she noted quietly. Capture would be preferable to killing if possible. Vampires rarely surrender, Issei responded practically. Especially nobles with centuries of power accumulation. They emerged onto the second floor to find Count Orlox waiting with aristocratic patience. Positioned between them and a female vampire currently accessing Issei's storage vault through what appeared to be complex magical bypass methods. The Crimson Emperor returns, Orlox greeted with mocking formality. And with such interesting companions. The Gremory heiress herself deigns to participate in field operations. How democracy has corrupted devil nobility. Your security breach ends now. Rias stated with commanding authority that reflected her highborn status. Surrender and your execution will be merciful. Orlox's laughter echoed through the warehouse, a sound devoid of humor but rich with centuries of aristocratic disdain. Charming. The child of Lucifer's puppet regime believes she can issue commands to Haustep's nobility. His attention shifted to Issei. And you, Hunter, aligning with devils represents such a disappointing decline in standards. What would your esteemed mentor think of such compromises? The attempt at psychological manipulation was transparent. Yet Issei felt unexpected discomfort at the vampire's accurate assessment. His mentor had indeed maintained strict separation from other supernatural factions, especially devils, whom he considered fundamentally untrustworthy despite tactical alliances. My mentor would prioritize Dracula's continued imprisonment over factional purity, Issei responded evenly, advancing with weapon ready. As do I. Noble sentiment, Orlox acknowledged with mocking approval. Though perhaps premature given current circumstances. Without further preamble, the vampire noble attacked, with the direct aggression of lesser undead but with the calculated precision of centuries honed combat experience. Shadows coalesced around him, forming whip-like extensions that struck with concussive force while maintaining distance from Issei's silver-edged blade. Rias countered with destruction magic, crimson energy cutting through the shadow constructs and forcing Orlox into defensive positioning. The cooperative attack pattern emerged naturally, Issei pressing forward with physical assault while Rias provided ranged support that limited the vampire's evasion options. Fascinating coordination, Orlox noted as he narrowly avoided a combined attack that would have incapacitated lesser opponents. The hunter adapts to devil methodology more effectively than anticipated. Lady Carmilla, Lo will find this development most interesting. The casual reference to Carmilla suggested connection to her faction despite Orlox's apparent loyalty to Dracula's resurrection, another layer of complexity in vampire politics. What is Carmilla's interest in the resurrection? Issei demanded, pressing his attack to exploit momentary distraction. Historical records position her as Dracula's lieutenant. Orlox's expression combined amusement with condescension. Historical records compiled by humans and devils. How charmingly incomplete. He manifested a blade of solidified shadow, meeting Issei's next strike directly. Vampire history extends beyond your limited understanding, Hunter. The female vampire at the storage vault turned briefly from her work, irritation evident in her sharp features. Cease the historical lecture, Count. Complete the extraction so we may depart. Unlike Orlox's 19th century formal attire, she wore modern tactical equipment, form-fitting body armor modified for vampire physiology, with specialized tools arranged for efficient access. Her practical approach contrasted sharply with the Count's aristocratic affectations. Patience, Lady Valerius. Orlox chided without taking his attention from the combat. Some conversations are worth having, even in challenging circumstances. The name registered in Issei's memory, Valerius, an ancient vampire. House historically aligned with scientific advancement rather than mystical tradition. Their bloodline specialized in technological adaptation of vampire abilities, practical innovation over aristocratic preservation. The vault security isn't responding to standard bypass methods, Lady Valerius reported with professional detachment. The hunter has incorporated non-standard protection elements. As expected from one of his reputation, Orlox acknowledged. To Issei, he added, your methodology has been studied extensively, Crimson Emperor. Your preference for layered security with unconventional elements has been noted in vampire intelligence assessments. The revelation that vampires maintained detailed intelligence on his operational patterns was unsettling, mirroring his earlier discovery of devil surveillance. Apparently, his activities had drawn more attention than realized across supernatural factions. Rias capitalized on this momentary distraction, launching a concentrated destruction attack that forced Orlox to abandon his offensive posture. The vampire noble retreated several steps, shadows gathering around him in protective formation. Your destruction magic has improved since our last encounter. Gremory heiress, he noted with grudging appreciation. Though still lacking the refined control of your brother's technique. I don't need my brother's refinement to eliminate you, Rias countered. Crimson energy pulsing around her with increasing intensity. Your tactical position is compromised. Your perimeter guards have been eliminated, and my peerage is converging on your location. As if summoned by her words, Kiba appeared at a secondary entrance, blood-slicked demonic swords held at ready position. Perimeter secured, he reported. No survivors. Kaneko emerged from shadow moments later, taking position to block the primary escape route. Her typically expressionless face showed the slightest satisfaction at successful execution. Through the high windows, Akino's silhouette was visible against the night sky, lightning gathering around her hands as she maintained aerial containment. Surrounded by devil children, Orlox observed with theatrical disappointment. How undignified for one of my lineage. Lady Valerius abandoned her work at the vault, moving to Orlox's side with practical assessment rather than aristocratic lamentation. Tactical withdrawal is indicated, she stated flatly. The operational objective is compromised. Perhaps not entirely, Orlox countered, his gaze fixed on Issei with calculated assessment. We came for hunter technology. But the hunter himself represents greater value. The implication triggered immediate tactical recalibration. What had appeared to be a simple equipment theft operation might have been bait for a larger objective, Issei himself. Before this realization could translate to defensive positioning, Orlox launched a sudden offensive unlike his previous measured attacks. Shadow Koa, lest into solid projectiles that targeted not just Issei and Rias, but all Devil Team members simultaneously. The coordinated barrage forced defensive responses that momentarily divided their attention. In that fractional advantage, Lady Valerius produced a device unlike anything in Issei's extensive experience with vampire technology, a silver sphere inscribed with glowing arcane symbols that pulsed with gathering energy. Dimensional anchor point secured, she announced with clinical precision. Extraction protocol activated. Orlox nodded acknowledgement, shadows expanding around him in swirling vortex patterns. A pleasure to cross blades, Crimson Emperor. Until our next encounter, which I suspect will occur under Lady Carmilla's direct supervision. The silver sphere in Valerius's hand pulsed with blinding intensity, creating a localized distortion in spatial reality. Unlike conventional teleportation magic that Issei had encountered, this technology seemed to fold space itself, creating a pathway between dimensional boundaries. Stop them, Rias commanded, launching destruction magic at the forming portal. Her attack dissipated harmlessly against whatever barrier the device had established. Issei lunged forward, determined to prevent their escape with the intelligence they'd gathered about his security systems. His blade met unexpected resistance as Orlocks manipulated shadow into solid barrier, buying crucial seconds for their extraction technology to activate. Lady Carmilla sends her regards, the vampire noble stated with formal precision. She looks forward to discussing your bloodline's connection to her lord in person. Before Issei could respond, the dimensional distortion reached critical threshold. Reality seemed to invert around the vampires, their forms blurring as spatial coordinates realigned. Then, with a thunderclap of displaced air, they vanished, leaving only scorched floor markings where they had stood. Silence fell across the warehouse, as the devils processed what they had witnessed. Technological teleportation beyond conventional magical constraints represented significant advancement in vampire capabilities. What was that device? Kiba asked finally, approaching the scorched circle with professional caution. Unknown, Rias admitted, examining the residual energy signature with evident concern. Vampire technology typical. Why lags behind devil innovations in transportation magic? Not technology, Issei corrected, recognition dawning as he studied the floor markings. Adaptation of existing principles. The scorching paw, TTERN matches descriptions in my family archives, spatial manipulation based on blood resonance. Meaning? Akeno inquired, joining them from her aerial position. Ancient vampire nobility could vel through blood connections, using consumed vitality as pathway markers between locations. This appears to be technological implementation of that biological ability. Concerning advancement, Rias noted grimly, if they've developed methods to replicate innate vampire abilities through technology, our tactical assumptions need revision. Issei moved to examine his storage vault, confirming his earlier suspicion. They weren't after the equipment itself, he reported. The security remains intact. This was reconnaissance, gathering intelligence on my protection methods and technical capabilities. While testing our response patterns and team coordination, Kiba added with tactical insight. Classic intelligence gathering disguised as resource theft. The implication settled heavily across the group. What had appeared to be a straightforward defense operation had actually served the vampires' information gathering objectives regardless of outcome. They're preparing for something larger, Rias concluded, verbalizing the collective assessment. These graduated operations, first the shrine, now this facility, represent systematic intelligence gathering rather than immediate objective achievement. The reference to Carmilla remains significant, Akeno noted. Both encounters have mentioned her specifically, yet her faction supposedly opposes Dracula's resurrection according to devil intelligence. Issei considered the conflicting information with practiced analysis. Vampire factions are rarely as distinct as external intelligence suggests. Centuries of existence create complex loyalty patterns and hidden agendas. Regardless, we need better information about Carmilla's current position and objectives, Rias decided. Your Hong Kong contact becomes increasingly important. Issei nodded agreement. I'll establish secure communication tonight. Though his response timeline varies based on information availability and competing client demands. They secured the warehouse facility, adding devil-specific barrier protections to supplement Issei's hunter security measures. The combined defenses would prevent further vampire access while maintaining the cache's availability for their own operations if needed. As they prepared for return transportation, Rias addressed the operational implications directly. If they're specifically targeting you beyond just your bloodline utility, we need to reconsider security protocols. I'm capable of handling vampire attention, Issei responded automatically, hunter independence asserting despite practical considerations. No one questions your capabilities, Akeno interjected with diplomatic precision. But tactical reality suggests strength in coordinated defense rather than isolated positioning. The practical assessment echoed military principles Issei's mentor had emphasized despite his preference for solitary operation. Against organized vampire nobility with centuries of experience, even the most skilled hunter required strategic support infrastructure. Revised protocols, he conceded finally. Though operational flexibility must be maintained. Rias nodded agreement. We'll establish layered security that preserves mobility while providing necessary support. My peerage has experience with protective operations that don't compromise tactical effectiveness. Their return to Kuo Academy occurred without incident. Teleportation circle delivering them directly to the club building's main room. Despite the confrontation's limited physical intensity, the psychological impact of the vampire's technological advancement and targeted intelligence gathering created a thoughtful atmosphere. I've activated additional boundary monitoring, Akino reported after establishing communication with their defensive network. Any vampire signature within 5 kilometers will trigger immediate alert. Good, Rias acknowledged. Kiba, coordinate with Sona's group regarding expanded territorial surveillance. Kaneko, conduct physical perimeter verification before rest cycle. The ordered response demonstrated the Devil's experience with territorial defense, systematic protocols activated without panic or uncertainty. Issei noted their professional efficiency with grudging appreciation. As the others dispersed to their assigned responsibilities, Rias approached Issei with uncharacteristic hesitation. There's another matter we should discuss privately, she said, gesturing toward her personal office adjacent to the main club room. The formal office space reflected Rias's dual nature as both student council president and supernatural territory administrator. Academic awards shared wall space with arcane maps of ley line configurations, while a massive desk supported both school documents and magical reference texts. The vampire's specific interest in you personally rather than just your bloodline suggests they possess information we don't, she began once they were seated. So, nothing beyond the ritual requirements mentioned in our historical records. Issei nodded agreement. Orlox's familiarity with my mentor and operational methodology indicates deeper intelligence than casual observation would provide. Which raises the question of sources, Rias continued carefully. Someone with intimate knowledge of hunter operations has provided information to vampire nobility. Why? Specifically regarding your training and techniques. The implication hung unspoken between them. Either hunter security had been comprehensively breached, or someone within hunter hierarchy had operated with vampire intelligence gathering. You're suggesting betrayal within hunter ranks, Issei stated flatly. I'm acknowledging the tactical possibility based on observed vampire behavior, Rias clarified diplomatically. Their operational adaptation to your specific methodology suggests detailed knowledge beyond what could be gathered through standard surveillance. The assessment aligned with Issei's own tactical concerns. Though he'd hesitated to verbalize the conclusion, hunter tradition emphasized absolute loyalty to the cause. Betrayal was considered virtually unthinkable given the existential threat vampires represented to humanity. Yet practical experience had taught him that no group, however devoted, remained immune to infiltration or corruption. It's possible, he acknowledged finally. Though hunter communication networks have been fragmented since the European purges 80 years ago. Traditional hierarchies collapsed during that period, leaving primarily independent operators with limited formal connection, which would actually facilitate targeted corruption, Rias noted. Isolated individuals without institutional support structures become vulnerable to manipulation, especially when facing supernatural entities with centuries of experience in human psychology. The practical assessment struck uncomfortably close to Issei's own operational reality. Since his mentor's death, he had maintained minimal contact with other hunters, prioritizing operational security over community connection. While this approach reduced exposure risk, it also eliminated the protective oversight that traditional hunter structures had once provided. What are you suggesting? He asked directly. That we consider all information channels potentially compromised, Rias answered with equal directness. Including your Hong Kong contact and any other hunter resources you've maintained. Vampire nobility don't make tactical errors in intelligence operations. If they've allowed us to observe their interest in you specifically, it serves some strategic purpose. The logical conclusion created uncomfortable tactical implications. If all external resources were potentially compromised, their operational options narrowed significantly. We need independent verification channels, Issei concluded. Sources without connection to either hunter networks or conventional devil intelligence. Precisely. Rias agreed, which is why I've taken the liberty of establishing contact with a particular resource who specializes in operating outside traditional supernatural information structures. Issei raised an eyebrow questioningly. Azazel, Rias clarified, Governor General of the Gremory faction. Fallen angel leadership with specific interest in sacred gear research and vampire historical analysis. The suggestion triggered immediate skepticism. Fallen angels represented yet another supernatural faction with their own agendas and manipulative tendencies. Rating potential hunter compromise for fallen angel manipulation hardly improved their strategic position. I understand your hesitation, Rias acknowledged, reading his expression accurately. But Zazel offers specific advantages in our current situation. First, his faction maintains the most comprehensive sacred gear research in existence, including historical analysis of the boosted gear specifically. Second, his personal collection of vampire historical artifacts rivals any archive currently accessible. And third, he has no direct political interest in either Dracula's resurrection or its prevention. His involvement would be based on intellectual curiosity rather than factional advantage. The assessment contained logical merits despite Issei's instinctive distrust of additional supernatural involvement. If vampire nobility had indeed compromised hunter intelligence channels, alternative information sources became tactically necessary regardless of philosophical concerns. Limited engagement, he stipulated after consideration. Information exchange only, with operational security maintained. Rias nodded agreement. I've already established parameters along those lines. He agreed to provide historical analysis regarding the Crimson Tier and potential connections to your bloodline specifically, in exchange for technical data on the boosted gear's interaction with hunter abilities. The arrangement seemed reasonably balanced, though Issei maintained healthy skepticism regarding fallen angel motivations. His mentor had considered them marginally more trustworthy devils but fundamentally self-interested in all negotiations. When? He asked practically. Tomorrow evening, Rias answered. Neutral location with multiple exit options and established non-aggression protocols. Akeno will accompany us as she has historical connection to the Gremory faction that provides additional diplomatic leverage. Issei noted the careful phrasing without pressing for details. Every supernatural faction harbored complicated histories and personal entanglements. Practical alliance required respect for information boundaries unless operational necessity demanded otherwise. Acceptable, he acknowledged, though I'll maintain independent contingency options. I would expect nothing less, Rias replied with a smile that suggested genuine respect for his caution, rather than offense at implied distrust. Their discussion was interrupted by Akeno's arrival, her expression conveying urgency despite her typically composed demeanor. We've received communication from an unexpected source, she reported, placing a sealed envelope on Rias's desk. Delivered by messenger rather than magical transmission. The courier disappeared before security could determine their identity. The envelope bore no external markings beyond an elegant wax seal embossed with what appeared to be a stylized rose pattern. No address, no identification, only the distinctive crimson wax that practically glowed in the office's subdued lighting. Rias examined the seal without touching the envelope directly. No magical signatures detected, she noted. Though that doesn't preclude more subtle enchantments. Issei studied the rose emblem with growing recognition. That's the Bottori crest, he identified. Modified with specific elements associated with Carmilla's personal heraldry. Understanding passed between them immediately. A direct communication from vampire nobility, specifically from Carmilla's faction, delivered through non-standard channels to bypass conventional monitoring. Scanning for harmful elements, Akeno announced, hands weaving diagnostic patterns above the envelope. Complex magical formulas manifested briefly before dissipating. No detection spells, no tracking enchantments, no harmful substances. It appears to be exactly what it seems, a conventional letter. Rias carefully broke the wax seal, withdrawing a single sheet of expensive parchment covered in elegant handwriting. The ink held the distinctive metallic sheen of traditional vampire correspondence, manufactured from specialized minerals that retained clarity for centuries. She read silently for several moments before looking up with evident surprise. "It's an invitation," she stated, passing the document to Issei. "Addressed specifically to the last scion of House Hyodo, W. Ith acknowledgement of his devil associates of House Gremory." Issei examined the correspondence with professional caution. The elegant script conveyed formal diplomatic language with aristocratic precision. "To the last scion of House Hyodo, bearer of the Crimson Emperor's legacy, and his associates of House Gremory. Recent activities within vampire hierarchies necessitate diplomatic clarification to prevent unfortunate misunderstanding between our respective interests. House Carmilla extends formal invitation to neutral consultation regarding matters of mutual concern, specifically unsanctioned resurrection activities currently threatening established supernatural balance. This invitation extends diplomatic immunity under ancient protocols established during the Concord of Milan 1397. Guaranteeing safe passage and return regardless of historical grievances or current political alignments. The proposed consultation shall occur 3 nights hence at the Shadow Embassy. In Kyoto. Neutral territory maintained under combined protective covenants dating to the supernatural armistice of 1788. Formal response is requested through traditional channels or personal representative at your earliest convenience. With ancient respect for hunter bloodlines and acknowledgement of devil territorial sovereignty. Countess Carmilla Bottori, sovereign of House Carmilla, regent of the Eastern Courts. The formal diplomatic language contained multiple layers of supernatural protocol, references to historical agreements and established covenants that carried significant weight in traditional faction interactions. The Shadow Embassy, Akino noted with evident surprise. That's a diplomatic installation maintained by yokai leadership specifically for cross-faction negotiations. Entry requires mutual consent verified by independent arbiters. Suggesting legitimate diplomatic intent rather than tactical deception, Rias concluded thoughtfully. The location prevents ambush scenarios through established neutrality enforcement. Issei considered the invitation with practiced skepticism. Vampire nobility excelled at manipulation through formal protocols, using appearance of diplomatic engagement to advance hidden agendas. Carmilla's faction supposedly opposes Dracula's resurrection according to devil intelligence, he acknowledged. But vampire politica, positioning rarely reflects actual objectives. This could be elaborately disguised intelligence gathering. Possible, Rias agreed, though the formal invocation of the Milan Concord carries significant supernatural weight. Violation of those protocols would trigger automatic sanctions from multiple factions, including the Yokai Confederation that maintains the Shadow Embassy. The tactical assessment created complex decision parameters. Engaging directly with Carmilla's faction offered potential intelligence advantages but introduced unknown variables into their operational planning. We need more information before committing, Issei decided. Both about Carmilla's current position in vampire hierarchy and the specific diplomatic protections offered by this Shadow Embassy. Agreed, Rias nodded. This development makes our meeting with Azazel even more timely. His historical knowledge of vampire politics may provide context for Carmilla's sudden diplomatic outreach. And my Hong Kong contact should have preliminary information by tomorrow regarding current vampire factional alignments, Issei added. Combined intelligence will allow more informed decision regarding this invitation. In the meantime, we should prepare formal acknowledgement without commitment, Akino suggested. Diplomatic protocol requires response even if we ultimately decline the invitation. Rias agreed, already drafting appropriate language that maintained options while respecting supernatural diplomatic traditions. The unexpected communication had added another layer of complexity to an already multifaceted tactical situation. As midnight approached, the operational center gradually quieted as team members rotated to rest cycles under established security protocols. Issei found himself alone in the monitoring center, reviewing accumulated intelligence while maintaining communication with his Hong Kong contact through encrypted channels. His thoughts returned repeatedly to Carmilla's invitation and its implications. Historical records positioned her as one of Dracula's most loyal lieutenants, a powerful vampire noble who had supported his original reign and benefited from his patronage. Yet current intelligence suggested opposition to resurrection efforts, contradicting established understanding of vampire hierarchies. The inconsistency troubled his tactical assessment. Their historical records contain significant inaccuracies, or current actions masked deeper strategic objectives. Movement at the operations center entrance interrupted his analysis. Rias entered CA, reeing 2 mugs of what appeared to be hot chocolate, an incongruously normal offering amidst supernatural conflict planning. "You should be resting," she noted, placing 1 mug before him. "Even hunters require sleep eventually. I function effectively on limited rest cycles," Issei responded automatically, though he accepted the offered beverage with a nod of acknowledgement. "Established pattern during field operations. This isn't a temporary field operation anymore," Rias observed, taking a seat opposite him. "It's an extended campaign requiring sustained effectiveness. Resource management includes physical recovery." The practical assessment mirrored his mentor's occasional lectures about hunter endurance limitations. Effective combat required balanced recovery periods, a principle Issei acknowledged intellectually while frequently ignoring in practice. "I'll establish appropriate rest rotation after completing current analysis," he conceded. Rias studied him with unexpected perception. "Your independent operational history has established certain patterns that may require adjustment for team effectiveness," she noted without criticism. "My peerage functions through coordinated support structures rather than individual endurance testing." The observation carried tactical validity despite challenging his established methodology. Hunter training emphasized self-reliance, CE and independent decision-making, necessary attributes for solitary operations against supernatural threats. Devil peerage structure operated on fundamentally different principles, with complementary abilities and shared responsibility distribution. "Adjustment period," Issei acknowledged, surprising himself with the admission. "Different operational frameworks require integration time. Yet combat coordination developed almost immediately," Rias noted thoughtfully. "Your tactical adaptability in field operations contradicts your resistance to support structures in planning phases." Insight demonstrated unexpected perception regarding his operational psychology. Combat adaptation came naturally through hunter training, immediate tactical adjustment based on evolving threat assessment. Strategic planning traditionally occurred in isolation, reflecting hunter emphasis on individual decision authority. "Different training foundations," Issei explained after consideration. NTER methodology emphasizes tactical flexibility within strategic isolation. Devil peerage structure reverses that emphasis, shared strategy execution through specialized tactical roles. Creating complementary strengths when properly integrated, Rias concluded with evident satisfaction. Which is precisely why this alliance offers advantages against organized vampire nobility that neither faction could achieve independently. The logical assessment aligned with Issei's own tactical conclusions despite his philosophical reservations about cross-faction cooperation. Pragmatic necessity outweighed traditional separation when facing threats of this magnitude. "Your peerage demonstrates unusual combat effectiveness for devil nobility," he observed, redirecting the conversation slightly. Historical records suggest aristocratic houses typically emphasize political power over field capability." Rias's expression combined pride with something harder to interpret, perhaps determination born from personal experience. "My brother cast a long shadow," she acknowledged. "Establishing my own territory required demonstrating practical capability rather than relying on family influence. I selected peerage members based on complementary combat potential rather than political advantage." The explanation revealed unexpected commonality with hunter philosophical foundations, valuing demonstrative ability over inherited position or political connection. Despite fundamental differences between their factions, certain core principles apparently transcended supernatural boundaries. "Effective selection criteria based on observed results," Issei noted with professional approval. A smile touched Rias's lips at the characteristically understated acknowledgement. "High praise from the Crimson Emperor." "Practical assessment," he corrected automatically. "And the title isn't one I claimed. Yet you don't deny it when others use it," she observed with unexpected perception. Suggesting recognition of its tactical utility despite personal detachment from reputation building. The insight demonstrated attention to behavioral nuance that Issei hadn't anticipated from devil nobility. Hi's relationship with the hunter designation had evolved pragmatically, neither embracing nor rejecting a title that created useful psychological impact during supernatural confrontations. Before he could formulate response, the communication system activated with incoming transmission from his Hong Kong contact. Encrypted data began flowing across secure channels, preliminary intelligence regarding vampire factional movements over recent months. Timing, Issei noted, immediately shifting to operational focus as he decrypted the incoming information. Rias moved to his side, reviewing the data as it resolved into readable format. The intelligence painted complex picture of vampire political realignment, house loyalties shifting dramatically from traditional patterns as Dracula resurrection efforts advanced. House Tepes fracturing internally, she observed, highlighting specific elements in the report. Traditional loyalists moving to direct resurrection support while modernist factions withdraw from established territories. Quote, and House Carmilla consolidating diplomatic connections across multiple supernatural factions, Issei added, noting unusual patterns in vampire diplomatic missions. Establishing communication channels with groups historically considered enemies, including hunter enclaves in Eastern Europe. The intelligence contained another element that captured immediate attention: movement records for Lady Bartley over the preceding 6 months. According to the report, she had traveled between Tepes and Carmilla strongholds repeatedly, maintaining formal connection to both houses despite their apparent political opposition. Double agent possibility confirmed, Rias noted, indicating the travel patterns. Though which side represents her true loyalty remains unclear. Or she serves interests independent of either faction, Issei suggested, experience with vampire politics suggesting multiple layers of manipulation rather than simple binary opposition. Final section of the intelligence report addressed Carmilla specifically, providing historical context beyond conventional records. According to the Hong Kong contact sources, Carmilla's relationship with Dracula had evolved from lieutenant to rival over centuries, initial loyalty transforming gradually into political opposition as their visions for vampire society diverged. Philosophical schism rather than simple power competition, Rias summarized thoughtfully. Dracula maintained traditional domination ideology while Carmilla apparently evolved toward adaptation and coexistence strategies. Self-interested adaptation rather than altruistic cooperation, Issei clarified, maintaining realistic assessment of vampire motivation. Pragmatic recognition that supernatural balance serves certain vampire interests better than domination attempts. The intelligence painted Carmilla as dangerous but potentially rational actor within vampire hierarchy, someone whose opposition to Dracula's resurrection stemmed from calculated self-interest rather than moral objection to his methods. Which makes her diplomatic outreach tactically significant rather than obviously deceptive, Rias concluded. Her opposition to resurrection appears genuine based on consistent pattern recognition across multiple intelligence sources. Issei nodded agreement despite maintained skepticism. Authentic opposition doesn't guarantee trustworthy alliance. Vampire nobility operate through manipulation even when pursuing legitimate objectives. Understood, Rias acknowledged. But diplomatic engagement, and under neutral protocols offers intelligence advantages with limited vulnerability if approached with appropriate caution. The tactical assessment aligned with Issei's own conclusion despite philosophical hesitation. Practical necessity sometimes required engagement with dangerous factions when facing greater threats, a principle his mentor had reluctantly acknowledged despite hunter traditions of isolation. Conditional acceptance, he decided finally. With advanced location verification, maximum security protocols, and limited information disclosure parameters. Agreed, Rias confirmed. We'll draft formal response tomorrow after consulting with Azazel regarding historical context for Carmilla's current positioning. The decision established clear next steps despite remaining uncertainties. Information gathering would continue through multiple channels while preliminary engagement with Carmilla's faction proceeded under carefully controlled conditions. As they concluded their analysis session, Issei found himself contemplating the unexpected effectiveness of their collaborative approach. Despite fundamentally different backgrounds and methodologies, their tactical assessments had aligned on key points without requiring extensive negotiation or compromise. Perhaps his mentor's rigid boundaries between supernatural factions reflected outdated tactical thinking rather than essential hunter philosophy. Against threats of this magnitude, perhaps carefully managed alliance offered strategic advantages that tradition failed to recognize. Or perhaps he was rationalizing necessary compromise in the face of extraordinary circumstances. Only time would determine which interpretation proved accurate. Either way, the hunt had evolved beyond traditional parameters. Dracula's potential return represented existential threat that transcended factional boundaries, a reality that required tactical adaptation regardless of philosophical preference. And so the Crimson Emperor found himself allied with devils against vampire nobility, preparing for diplomatic engagement with yet another supernatural faction, while ancestral enemies maneuvered for advantage across traditional boundaries. The hunt continued, but on terms no traditional hunter would recognize. Chapter 2 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.